August 1914. British soldiers are retreating under fire, outnumbered, exhausted, sure they're about to die. And then, above the battlefield, shining figures appear in the sky, rank upon rank of them, facing the enemy. Stop. Rewind. That scene never happened. It has an author, a publication date, and a confession. This is the story of the miracle one man wrote, and of how a nation at war needed that miracle so badly that when the author confessed, for 30 years, nobody agreed to believe him. The real part first. Mons, Belgium, August 23, 1914. The British Expeditionary Force meets the German Army head-on, the first major British battle of the First World War. The British are heavily outnumbered. They hold for a day, professional, deadly rifle fire, and then begin a fighting retreat that will last 2 exhausting weeks. At home, Britain gets its first taste of what this war is. Casualty lists, retreat headlines. A public that entered the war expecting glory is suddenly desperate for any sign that heaven is on their side. Enter the author, Arthur Machen, a Welsh writer of mystical horror stories, respected, never rich, paying his bills as a journalist at a London evening paper. Reading the news from Mons, Machen does what writers do with grief. He writes a story, a short one. In it, a British soldier, facing the last charge, whispers a Latin prayer to St. George. And St. George answers, "With the dead of Aegean court." A line of phantom bowmen rises between the armies, and German soldiers fall by the thousand. When examined, their bodies show no wounds. The story runs in the evening news on September 29, 1914, which happens to be St. Michael's Day, the feast of the warrior archangel, written in first person, in the voice of a news report, with no label saying, fiction. Machen later said the story wasn't even good, he'd written better. History disagreed about which of his works would live forever. It picked the one he liked least. Within weeks, letters arrive. Parish magazines ask permission to reprint the story. Then one editor asks the question that starts everything. What were your sources? Machen answers honestly, there are no sources. I invented it, every word. And the reply he receives is the hinge of this entire story. You must be mistaken. It really happened. Watch what happens to his bowmen as the story is retold. Medieval archers are an odd detail, hard to explain from a pulpit, so in the retellings they begin to change. The arrows disappear, the bowmen grow taller, brighter. A row of shining beings, the new versions say, and then someone finally writes the word that fits a wartime sermon: angels. By the spring of 1915, the Angels of Mons are everywhere. Sermons, spiritualist journals, dinner tables. A nurse publishes accounts of wounded men who saw them, though never her own eyes, and never a name attached. And the miracle can't hold its shape. Some versions put St. George himself on horseback above the lines. Some count exactly 3 angels. Others describe a glowing cloud that stood between the armies. Every teller sees a different rescue. That's how rumor behaves. It's never how witnesses do. The angels don't stay alone. That same spring, church magazines tell of the Comrade in White, a figure walking the battlefield, lifting the wounded. Painters put him on canvas within the year. The front has become a place where a nation expects miracles. Artists print it, postcards, engravings, paintings, glowing ranks above the trenches, soldiers kneeling. The image becomes so familiar that remembering its birthday feels almost rude. And doubt gets expensive. To question the angels now is to insult the dead, the church, and the war effort in one sentence. The author's own confession becomes an act of bad citizenship. It gets better. A best-selling author publishes an entire book arguing Machen is wrong about his own story. Perhaps, the book suggests, the vision was real and Machen merely received it, like a radio set with ink. So did anyone check? Yes, in 1915, the Society for Psychical Research, an organization that very much wanted ghosts to be real, went looking for witnesses. They found none, not one first-hand account. Every trail ended the same way, a friend of a man who heard it from an officer whose name nobody caught. Their verdict, a legend standing on rumor. That same year, Machen republished the story as a book, with a long preface performing an autopsy on his own miracle, how a tale becomes a testimony, step by documented step. It sold out edition after edition, as a miracle, not a confession. And the soldiers themselves? Historians have combed the letters and diaries written at Mons in the weeks before Machen's story appeared. Angels, not found, not once. The visions all arrive after the printing press. Defenders had one trump card, a general's letter, published years later in his memoirs, dated before Machen's story. A researcher checked the general's actual wartime files. The letter isn't in them. It appears to have been written after the fact. Now the honest question, why did a nation of newspaper readers believe a ghost story over its own author? Because the belief wasn't stupidity, it was grief, looking for a door. Every family had someone at the front. If angels stood over the retreat, then the dead did not die unwatched, and the cause had heaven's signature on it. Doubt offered nothing to hold. The legend offered everything. And note the machinery, because it hasn't aged a day. A fiction printed without a label, in a trusted format, meeting an audience that needed it to be true. That recipe didn't retire in 1915. In 1914, the loop took 6 months. A story, a reprint, a sermon, a nation. Today, the same machine runs in hours. A post, a screenshot, a share, a fact. The only step that never got faster is the correction. Ask Machen. Machen spent the rest of his life gently repeating the truth. "It's my story," he said. "I made it up. I'm sorry." He grew tired of the angels he'd created. They never grew tired of him. And the legend still earns. In 2001, a British newspaper announced a sensation, a soldier's diary and even film footage of the angels, found in an antique shop trunk, a few miles from where Machen was born. Hollywood money came calling. A year later it unraveled, a hoax, a fake grown on a fiction. One battle, one tired writer, one story without a label. 6 months later, a national miracle, with witnesses, paintings, and a bibliography. That's all it takes. That's all it ever takes. Machen learned the hardest rule of his craft the hard way. A writer can invent a miracle, but once the world needs it, he can never take it back. The angels are still up there, filed under true.